Welcome back to IDP Plus Trends. It is week 9. We got your IDP defensive rankings on the defensive linemen, linebackers, and defensive backs for you this week. With myself, Johnny, and Steve here, we're going to break down these three individual roster positions. First, we're going to take a look at the defensive linemen, which I am sharing my screen for those who are viewing and listening. You can get these rankings on our website at idpplus.com and then hover over the rankings bar at the top and then go to weekly. That's what we are going to do. We're going to look at weekly for week 9. You can also get dynasty rankings, season rankings, projections, all kind of different rankings as well as our tools and Discord access and a bunch of other good stuff. So if you're not already subscribed to IDP Plus, go ahead and do that. Without further ado, let's take a look at our defensive linemen, Steve. Coming in at number 1 in week 9 is Maxx Crosby. Number 2 is Myles Garrett. Number 3, Christian Ellis. Number 4, Will Anderson, already played. Number 5, Trey Hendrickson. Number 6, Danielle Hunter. Number 7, Dexter Lawrence. Number 8, Will McDonald. 9, Brian Burns. 10, Josh Hines-Allen. 11, Greg Rousseau. 12, Jarrett Verse. 13, Carl Granderson. 14, Jonathan Grenard. 15, Zach Allen. 16, Boye Mafe. 17, Harold Landry. 18, Josh Sweat. 19, Quinnen Williams. 20, Andrew Van Ginkel. 21, Chris Jones. 22, Jonathan Cooper. 23, Khalil Mack. 24, Keon White. And rounding out at 25, Montez Sweat. Steve, looking at this top 25 here, we saw some changes from last week. We got our boy Ellis up here. He's kind of trending upwards. This is kind of an outlier. If you can get him to play the defensive lineman position, he has a safe tackle floor, questionable on the week. Looks like a good play here. Comes in at number 3. Then we got somebody else who we were talking about last week. Greg Rousseau had a big week. I liked him last week's matchup. Number 11 this week. So another guy toward right outside the top 10 who could have another good week against Miami. Jared Verse, I like him at 12. Some other guys, Zach Allen made the jump. He's on this top 25 now. We got Van Ginkel at 20. Chris Jones moves down a little bit. Steve, what are you seeing when you're looking at this list here for week 9?
Like anything else, these can always be critiqued however you want and how you view things and how your scoring is going to be for your IDP, right? So that's going to be a big factor. So of course, hit us up in the comments if you guys do have some questions of players. Kind of let us know your scoring and kind of that will help us out. I hate to start, but I'm going to start with where I feel like players are not getting respected enough. So if you're looking at just trends in the last 3 to 4 games, there are some players that are not even 5 that I believe should be. So first player I want to mention, DeForest Buckner. He's not at all on this list. DeForest Buckner, obviously he's coming back from injury, right? He had missed time. He obviously is someone that I talked about in our waiver wire article that I felt deserved a lot more credit and should be picked up because he played week 1, he played week 2, obviously was injured, and he came back in week 8. And in week 8, he had 8 points, again, depending on your scoring, but he had 2 quarterback hits, a sack. He had, 3 tackles. Like he did well for his first game back. And I like this matchup that he's got coming up. I think, again, people forget how great Buckner has been in fantasy. He's one of the best defensive tackles you can have in the fantasy space. So I'm a little disappointed that he's not on here, like, at all. So I'm kind of like, well, looking at the list, and I'm not going to, there's some players I'm going to take off that I would rather have. Again, I'd rather have Buckner than Chris Jones. I'd rather have, I would say even, going into the Carl Granderson, I would possibly even move down some if I can move up a couple of these guys. Josh Hines-Allen is still getting way too much respect because of his name. He still has not been producing anything. He's way too high in this ranking. I don't love his matchup against the Eagles. I think the Eagles have kind of out, meaning they know they've got to run with Saquon. They know they're going to obviously put Jalen Hurts in situations where he's not going to be having to pass 25 plus times a game. And that just helps negate Josh Hines Allen's ability to actually make big plays. So again, somebody I would definitely move down this list if we're talking the rankings. And another player that I really wanted to talk about that isn't on here, and this kind of coming from that same game, is Jalen Carter. I know I'm talking defensive tackles with Buckner and Carter, but Jalen Carter definitely deserves some respect. He's not on here. You know, in the last, again, we're talking 3 or 4 games. Obviously, week 8, he was not great against Cincinnati, surprisingly, because Cincinnati does not have a great offensive line. But, you know, you're looking against the Giants, he had, you know, almost double-digit points. He had 2 sacks, 2 quarterback hits, 4 tackles. Week before that, he had a sack, 3 quarterback hits, a tackle. And now he's going against a Jaguars team that just let go their left tackle. So they're going to have to use the guards to help with, you know, the edge rushers. And so that leaves Jalen Carter, I think, in some situations where he's going to have one-on-one, you know, against the center or against the guard. And I think he's going to be in a great position to go after Trevor Lawrence, go after, you know, maybe a couple tackles in behind the line against Travis Etienne if he plays, or Tank Bigsby, which I think is probably going to get the start. So he's definitely a lineman that I think deserves more respect. He's doing really, really well. He's about in line of where he was last season, but he's pacing obviously a lot better. But he's coming into his own the last few games. And I think part of it is just, you know, I look at trends. I know you can look at the holistic aspect of the season, but sometimes you got to look at the trends. Sometimes some players just start hitting their stride. So I really like looking at where these guys are at and what they've been able to do in the last 3 to 4 weeks. And I just think those are guys that should get a little bit more respect. Overall, the rankings aren't horrible. I, again, love Dexter Lawrence, Trey Hendrickson, Will Anderson, you know, Garrett, obviously Crosby, Brian Burns. I love where he's at against Washington. I think it's gonna be a good one for him. You know, I think some of the rankings are in a good spot. I still think Van Ginkel finally got some respect. I think you and I talked about that. Like he's gotten, you know, he's finally getting some respect of where he's at. But those are just a couple names that I feel like definitely deserve a lot more respect, should be considered in your lineups. You know, if you're talking a 12-team league and we're talking the top 24, 25 players, like those guys are great defensive linemen too, positions that can get you some good upside, good matchups. And again, some of these guys that are ranked a little bit higher, like I said, you know, I'm moving Chris Jones down. I'm moving Josh Hines Allen. Until those guys start proving some stuff, I'm taking those guys off this top 25 and just keeping them away until we can see more out of them before I feel a lot more comfortable with them.
Good stuff. Defensive lineman, top 25. Number 1, Maxx Crosby. I like him there too. I'd probably rank him there too. Steve, is he still your number 1?
Yeah, just because I don't believe in Cincinnati's offensive line. They've just continued to have struggles. Um, the interesting part is you're not going to have Zach Moss in this game. You'll have Chase Brown. So it makes me wonder if, just because no one's afraid of the Raiders, like, do they have to pass a lot? So that might negate some of Crosby's ability, but he's also a good run defender. So, you know, you still want to keep him in there.
Yeah, I agree. Good job, Steve. Appreciate the breakdown. We're going to head right over to our linebackers, which I do the rankings over here weekly at IDP Plus for our weekly linebackers and defensive backs as well. So these are my lists, and Steve's going to pick me apart here. We're going to start with number 1, Roquan Smith. Number 2, Zaire Franklin. Number 3, Robert Spillane. Number 4, Bobby Wagner. Number 5, Jermaine Pratt. Number 6, EJ Speed. 7, Logan Wilson. 8, Ivan Pace Jr. 9, Foyesade Oluokun. 10, Eric Kendricks. 11, Dorian Williams. 12, Quay Walker. 13, Levante David. 14, Nakobe Dean. 15, Jamian Sherwood. 16, Kaiser White. 17, Ernest Jones. 18, Zach Bond. 19, Terrell Bernard. 20, TJ Edwards. 21, Quincy Williams. 22, Nick Bolton. 23, Alex Anzalone. 24, Bobby Okereke. And 25, rounding it out, Cody Barton. Steve, I wanted to mention too, before I start talking about the players individually here, the linebackers, we have Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is out this week, a big hit to fantasy managers, fantasy owners of him. Jordan Hicks, also from Cleveland, is out. So Mahmoud Diabate is probably somebody who, if you're streaming linebackers and you get this guy, you can probably feel comfortable for a 7-8 tackle piece type of game from him versus the Chargers. So there's a lot of shake up in Cleveland, but as far as the whole league goes, not a lot of players that are deemed out at this point. It's Friday, going into the weekend. We have Robert Spillane, questionable. Levante David, I believe, truly questionable. Ernest Jones popped up on the injury report with a new neck injury, which is never good, but we'll see how he is. Still questionable. Nate Landman might be in for a bigger timeshare with Troy Anderson, questionable right now. Our boy Eric Kendricks is questionable. Denzel Perryman is questionable. And the aforementioned Christian Ellis from the Patriots, who has come up the last few weeks, trending up, is also questionable. So we have a lot of questions going into the Week 9 weekend. But, Steve, as this stands, speaking of your trends, Ivan Pace Jr., he was, I believe, in the top 15. I had him last week. Here he is at number 8, coming off back-to-back double-digit games. Again, Blake Cashman is not going to be in the lineup. He gets an Indianapolis team that the matchup isn't great to this point, but now we switch quarterbacks. I think in this game you get a heavy dose of Jonathan Taylor. Anytime a guy can get you double-digit tackles, especially has in the back-to-back games, also can get sacks at any given rate. Ivan Pace, to me, is a walking bomb. Then we got guys that coming back from injury. Foyesade Oluokun comes into this list, cracking it for the first time in many, many weeks. Looks like his snap share is back, not 100% yet, but he was knocking off the rust. Devin Lloyd, you won't find on this top 25. You actually won't even find him on the top 40. His play time dipped a lot. And Ventrell Miller seems to be somewhat, consistent there, a little bit more playing time than Lloyd. But Foyer, I can't rank him in the top 8, top 5 just yet. He really didn't tear it up really any game so far this season. Maybe week 1, but to me, it's like they have 3 good linebackers. They're playing them all. Kind of limits all their upside. So a tribute at number 9 to be up there is pretty respectable. Dorian Williams, we get Terrell Bernard back, but I'm still rocking with him. I still like him a lot. As far as Nakobe Dean in Philly and Zach Bond, here we are playing whack-a-mole again. I still like Nakobe Dean more, as far as not only this week, but throughout the season. I just think he holds up a little bit better. Maybe Bond has the higher upside, but I both think they're great plays. Ernest Jones, we'll see if he plays, but he makes this list. Double-digit tackle in his first game for Seattle, so big ups there. TJ Edwards seems like he keeps sliding down. Man, just the production. I don't think he has a great matchup versus Arizona. His track record this year hasn't been great either, so bad taste in my mouth with him. Your boy Anzalone, his return, playing 100% of snaps, I believe 7 or 8 tackles last week. Versus Green Bay, I like him a lot. And then finally on the top 25, Cody Barton. Cody Barton, I think like maybe Josie Jewell, obviously Neville Hewitt did, but I think some of these players might have a safer floor. But I just think Cody Barton versus the Baltimore Ravens, who give up the 8th most tackles at linebacker. I know it's technically, when you look at points in fantasy, you're looking at Baltimore as a middle of the tier or lower tier matchup. But as of recent, they've been given a lot of linebacker tackles up. So to me, I think Cody Barton still deserves to be on this list, but it's pretty deep. We've got guys here later. Henley, I think, is a great start this week. Actually, it's not versus New Orleans. It's versus Cleveland. He's going to play. Diane Henley, I think, is a good, start. He's a little bit deeper in here. Jordan Brooks, another good player. I've mentioned Diabate. I have him at 34. Sternad has been hot. That's a trendy guy at 35. Overshown, I like him a lot, but he has a tough matchup versus Atlanta. He did get that sack last week, and that, if you get a sack, it's good for your fantasy prowess, but you take that away, and the tackles weren't there in a good matchup, so I think he gets a little bit taken down the ranks in a bad matchup. And then another guy I just wanted to mention is KJ Britt. If Levante, first off, KJ Britt's been on a little bit of a upswing, but if Levante David is truly inactive this coming week, I think KJ Britt's the linebacker you want in Tampa Bay, and I think he actually has a higher upside than 39 overall. But just within looking the top 40 and specifically top 25, Steve, what are you feeling about this list?
It's a good list. I will say, looking at it, Again, I'm just looking at the trends and where these players have been. I like where Evan Pace is at. I do wish you moved Nakobe Dean up higher. I just think matchup wise against Jacksonville, who's going to try to establish the run and keep that Philly offense off the field, might play a factor. Because Nakobe Dean right now in the last 3 weeks has been linebacker one in fantasy. Again, all scoring aside, we'll see how you score, but like he's been amazing. Ivan Pace right behind him. He's number two, so got to give credit to those guys. So I think Nakobe and Ivan Pace are probably my favorites this week. I would move Nakobe a little bit higher. One player, like you mentioned his name, but he's not in your top 25, was Justin Sternad. I thought Sternad would be a little bit higher for you on the ranking because I do like I like his matchup. And lately he's averaging like almost 8 tackles a game. He's been really consistent in the last 4 weeks. So I thought he would be a little bit higher this week, but I just because I think Baltimore. We don't know what's going on with Lamar. He's missed several games. There's a chance he may not even play. I think he's going to gut through it. With that said, I think with him gutting through it, I think they're going to rely on Derrick Henry. They have to just to kind of put some of that pressure off of him. So I like Sternad a little bit higher. I'd put him as a nice linebacker too. And it's tough because I think when we're talking linebackers, there are so many good ones. Some of these guys are ranked literally by like a tackle or so that can literally move them up or down. It's that close in a lot of these guys. So don't shoot yourself in the foot if you put one guy above the other. And like realistically, these guys are so close that there's so many different options out there, especially if you're in a 12 team. Like I'm in a 12 team league, and in my league, my home league, we're required to have one linebacker, one DB, one defensive lineman, and then 3 IDP. So you can put whatever you want. So I stack at linebacker. I've got 4 linebackers on my squad. So, and for me, that's a big deal. I wanted to make sure I have as many great linebackers. But if you're only needing 2 linebackers, two defensive backs, then there's still a lot of great options in waivers. So I like where you put Ivan Pace. I would like Nakobe Dean a little higher, and I think Sternad gets a little bit more respect.
And it's a good week too. It's deep. Like we mentioned, not many injuries to this point. There's some guys definitely who can, have upside that aren't on the top 25. I'm thinking about guys. Your boy Sternad, I like him. And the thing is it's kind of like the Peyton Wilson effect in Pittsburgh. It scares me though because Sternad plays like less than 70% snaps, and usually for linebackers that's a bad recipe. But he just keeps getting tackles. I believe he gets some sacks too. So yeah, his upside is through the roof. But only playing 60% of tackles. Granted, he's hit every game. He's done your team well, but at the same time, that just looms in the back of my head with him. But I honestly could say that Sternad probably has the higher upside than Barton. At that point, maybe Barton has the safer floor, but that's a good predicament to have if you're between Sternad and somebody else around his rankings. Like I said, it's a deep week. Mahmoud Diabate could be a nice streamer if you're in a deeper league. KJ Britt, I had mentioned Henley, Josie Jewell, good week for him versus New Orleans. Don't forget about Omar Spates in those super deep leagues. Maybe it wasn't exactly the week we wanted last week for the Rams, but maybe the second time around he gets more snaps if you're in a very deep league. Maybe someone to stash. And then finally, Christian Ellis from New England. It's kind of a new man on campus there. But as far as his dual eligibility, if you can start him at defensive line, I think he's a good start as a linebacker, let alone a defensive lineman. So maybe if you're in a deep league and he hasn't been spotted out just yet, he might be a good start. Granted, he's questionable. So I think on the right side of questionable, but still bear worth looking into this weekend before you set that lineup. Steve, we're going to move on to our defensive backs right now. So I'm going to flash over to our website, hover over the rankings, and go to our defensive back, which I also cover these rankings as well. So your week 9 defensive backs. I have it number 1, 4th in the league in tackles, Budda Baker. Number 2, Kyle Hamilton. Number 3, Julian Love. Number 4, Nick Cross. Number 5, Brian Branch. Number 6, Jesse Bates. Number 7, Antoine Winfield. Number 8, Brandon Jones. Number 9, Derwin James. Number 10, Kyle Duggar. Number 11, Tyler Nubin. Number 12, Xavier Woods. Number 13, Xavier McKinney. Number 14, Julian Blackmon. 15, DeMar Hamlin. 16, Tre'Von Moehrig. 17, Cam Bynum. 18, Quentin Lake. 19, Kevin Byard. 20, Cam Curl. 21, Riley Moss. 22, Harrison Smith. 23, Kirby Joseph. 24, Grant Delpit. And 25, Marlon Humphrey. And that's also with the players who have been ruled out this week. It has been at the defensive back position. P.J. Locke, Jaquan Brisker, Evan Williams, my boy, L'Jarius Sneed, and Javon Holland. None of those guys are playing this week. They are out. Javon Holland's doubtful, but word inside of Miami's locker room is he's not going to play. Then for your questionable tags, you got to watch for Cam Curl, Kyle Duggar, Marlon Humphrey, Amani Hooker, Geno Stone, Antoine Winfield, Tyke Smith, and Kyler Gordon. Those are all questionable players. So, Steve, some guys here that creep up into the rankings. Didn't have Delpit there last week. Don't believe I had Kirby Joseph there last week. I like them a lot this week. They've proved to be pretty safe playmakers. So they get a little bit of love in this rankings. Tre'Von Moehrig jumps up to number 16. I think he has, it's a pretty safe floor and a decent, upside, high upside too. So at 16, maybe I'm being a little bit down on him. Cameron Bynum looks like he's kind of turned the page and came back to his old ways a little bit for the better. DeMar Hamlin at 15, still like him a lot. Think he has a safe floor for tackles. Probably gets 5 or 6 tackles safe this week in a matchup versus Miami. My boy Julian Blackmon, I still think he's a solid tackle. He's a solid option at defensive backs because the tackle floor, not really the huge upside you're looking for. Maybe like in a Xavier McKinney, Xavier Woods, Kyle Duggar. Let's see if he can get back to the form he was in, last year. The Kyle Duggar we know. He's questionable right now. Not a great matchup versus Tennessee. So 10 is a little bit, I think, generous for him. And I think that then the top 10, top 9, 8, I think are pretty shoo-in at that point, Steve. What do you say here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at your list. I'm looking at figure out like, okay, is there anybody that I would ultimately take off or move up? It's tough to say because again, at least from my home league, the biggest benefit for defensive backs is the fact that we get big points for pass deflections, big points for interceptions. And still obviously points for, solo and assist tackles. So, a defensive back could be one of your league winners depending on how active they are. Like for example, Marlon Humphrey, I mentioned him as a great waiver wire grab because he's been available in a lot of leagues. He had 2 interceptions that last week. He can make some tackles, but he is dealing with an injury. And so you've got some concerns there, but I like that you put him in the top 25. I mean, you squeaked him in, but I thought he was a great ad. Especially against a rookie this week in Bo Nix. If he does play, it's going to be a little tough. And then again, depending on how your scoring is, you've got somebody like Cam Taylor-Britt, who I like for Cincinnati as a cornerback. He's gotten, he had 9 tackles in week 8. He had 7 tackles the week before that, 7 tackles the week before that. Plus he's getting pass deflections. Like, he's doing a really good job. So I think he's another player that I like. And it's odd because I don't always talk about, cornerbacks, but they've been a lot more effective lately. And at least a lot of them are starting to get involved in the run side. They normally you see, I hate to say it, but Trayvon Diggs is getting heat because he didn't make the tackle, against the last week in the 49ers game. A lot of cornerbacks are making those plays. A lot of cornerbacks are going after, the run and trying to make a play. So, you got to give a lot of these guys credits. Obviously we lost a big one this, the Saints did. And, and it kind of sucks there. You don't have like Lenore is one of my favorites this week, but of course he's on a bye, so you can't play him. But I think he's going to be someone we're going to talk about next week for sure because he's been great for the 49ers. But I like the list. I don't really have any complaints. Again, it's a risk. When you start talking, I would say anywhere from the 18 to 25, you could probably flip around those guys. You could even like sub a Riley Moss out and put in, an Alontae Taylor, who I think might go off on Carolina because you got Bryce Young at quarterback, or, Cam, Taylor, who I've talked about. Even Jordan Whitehead might have to be a big play against Kansas City. So a couple tweaks here and there on the ends, the back end side, but realistically, I like what you've got here. You've got Harrison Smith's been great. He's been on a nice little streak there. The old man's still making plays, which is great news.
Yeah.
Xavier Woods is another player I really like. He's been making some big plays, and he's moved up in this ranking, which is great. I see your boy Julian Blackman's still there. So I don't hate any of and I think the list is really good. Realistically, anywhere from 1 to 10, you can kind of move around. I know Buda Baker's been obviously the guy right now. He's not a big play guy. Like it's funny, in my scoring, my home league, Buda Baker's not even rostered. His tackling is important, but he's not making the other plays. And because as a defensive back, he's not making deflections, interceptions, and things like that. That's not what he's been standing out for. Like, he's got 2 pass deflections this season. He's got no forced fumbles. He's got no, intercept. Like, he doesn't have that value. So it's funny because how everyone scores is it's such a big piece to it that Buda Baker's not even rostered, But realistically, if you're talking tackles, I mean, he's been amazing and he's got a good matchup. I like this matchup for him, going into this week against a Chicago team that I think is going to force a lot of throws. But I like the list. Like I said, I just move a couple people. I like I said, Grant Delpit, like that. Again, a lot of these guys you can just slightly move up and down, and you wouldn't even. It's not gonna be a big difference. Like if you swap Jordan Whitehead out for Riley Moss, nobody would make a difference. It wouldn't pay a big deal, like at all.
I feel you, man. And good point on the scoring difference. If you've watched me talk about these rankings, you've heard me say that I premise it, prioritize it on tackles. And Steve had mentioned out like Buda Baker, you might be playing in a league where he's not rostered like Steve is, so all comes back to your scoring. I try to blend it, I try to like Sternad, the fact that he can get sacks, that's cognizant, but like I try to blend that with the snap count and recent production, put it all together. But, if you have any questions, it's a good point. If you have any questions, give us your scoring, put it in the comments below. We will get back to you. Thanks for rocking with us. Thanks for watching our week 9, IDP rankings, and we will catch you next week as far as IDP Plus, and good luck this weekend.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.